The preservation of this secret under the floorboards was not an act of random madness or an isolated impulse of a single cruel man, but a calculated maintenance of power that paid dividends in both social standing and psychological dominance. In the rigid hierarchy of the antebellum South, the master of a great house was the absolute sun around which all other lives orbited, a patriarch whose was the only law within the boundaries of his estate. To admit to a crime as grotesque and prolonged as the permanent confinement of a child would be to admit a catastrophic crack in the divine order they claimed to represent. The family benefited from the boy's disappearance because it reinforced their reputation as people who could make reality itself bend to their whims. By making a human being vanish without a trace in plain sight, they sent a chilling, unspoken message to every other enslaved person on the property. I can erase you. I can make it as if you never existed, and the world will not even blink. This fear was an instrument of control more effective than any whip or iron chain, ensuring a level of compliance born of the terrifying realization that the law offered no protection once you crossed the threshold of that mansion. Beyond the psychological leverage, there was a grim, practical benefit. In the twisted, mercantilist logic of the era, an enslaved person who was dead to the official world but still physically present and under total control was a resource that existed outside the scrutiny of creditors, tax assessors, or heirs. He was a shadow worker, a ghost in the machinery of the household who could be used for tasks that required total discretion or simply kept as a trophy of a sovereignty that knew no limits. But the greatest benefit was the preservation of their own souls, or the hollowed-out, performative versions of them they presented to the world. By successfully hiding the boy, they maintained their status as pillars of the community, as God-fearing Christians, and as noble leaders of society built on the systematic crushing of others. They traded a boy's life for the comfort of their own conscience, convinced that as long as the secret remained under the floorboards, it remained outside the judgment of man and, by some incredible feat of theological contortion, outside the judgment of God. The community at large benefited from this agreement of silence as well, though in a more abstract and insidious way. Every time a neighbor looked the other way, every time a local official ignored a persistent rumor or a discrepancy in the parish records, they were reinforcing the stability of their own world. If the master of one great estate could be held legally accountable for the private treatment of his property, then the entire foundation of their wealth and lifestyle was at risk. The silence was a collective insurance policy for the slaveholding class. By allowing the boy to remain in the dirt, they were protecting the inalienable right of every master to do exactly as he pleased behind closed doors. The benefit was the maintenance of a status quo where the powerful were never truly questioned and where the disappearance of the inconvenient was simply accepted as a collateral cost of the Southern civilization. The boys' suffering was the silent oil that kept the grand engine of their society running without friction, a hidden sacrifice made at the altar of domestic autonomy. We analyzed the complicity of class, where loyalty to one's social equals outweighed any flicker of human empathy. The refinement of the family above, the piano lessons, the imported wines, the education of their children, was literally bought with the currency of absolute, unblinking cruelty practiced in the dark. This was the price of power, a world where the light was only possible because someone else was being held in the absolute dark. The house stood firm not because of its brick and mortar, but because of the shared secret that bound the community together in a league of silence. The silence of the house was shattered not by a scream, but by the mundane sound of progress, the rhythmic thud of a carpenter's hammer as the new year of 1865 dawned, bringing with it the chaotic end of the old world. The new owners, a family of moderate means seeking to renovate the crumbling estate, ordered the removal of the rotted pine planks in the servants' wing, expecting only dust and the nests of vermin. Instead, as the boards were pried away with a groan of rusted nails, the air was suddenly thick with a scent that defied time, a mixture of ancient cedar, damp earth, and a sharp, metallic tang that made the workmen gag. They found the crucible that Samuel had been placed in, a space barely 3 feet deep, lined with ritual concealments including animal bones, beads, and the remnants of a child's doll, items meant to bind a spirit or protect a secret through a spiritual cache. The physical evidence of the boy's confinement was a catalog of systematic erasure. Beneath the floorboards, investigators uncovered a small, unlined pit, a storage space common in slave houses but repurposed here for a far more sinister end. Within this cavity lay the remains of a life lived in increments, a penny from a later era wedged into the dirt, perhaps dropped by a subsequent generation who heard the thumping sounds and dismissed them as settling wood. The most haunting discovery was a collection of portraits, not on paper, but scratched into the very underside of the floorboards in charcoal and blood, depicting a face that grew older and more distorted with every plank. These messages, invisible for over a century, acted as a hidden diary of a ghost in the machinery, proving that while the boy was physically suppressed, his consciousness had clawed at the boundaries of his wooden prison. When the floor was fully opened, the over-acuteness of the senses that had plagued the house's residents for years was finally validated. The thumping sound they interpreted as a heartbeat was revealed to be a mechanical resonance caused by the boy's constant, desperate rhythmic tapping against the joists. The discovery rippled through the local community, which had long practiced a collective insurance policy of silence to protect the domestic autonomy of the planter class. Now, in the harsh light of 1865, and again through the lens of modern archaeological scrutiny, the truth could no longer be contained by the boards. The great work of the Blackwood family, the monstrous experiment in sovereignty, was laid bare as nothing more than a shallow grave for the living, a secret that had finally outgrown its confinement. The discovery of the boy's confinement served as a catalyst for a broader investigation into ritual concealments across the region, revealing that the Blackwood house was not an isolated incident, but part of a wider architecture of domestic terror. The physical space where the boy was held has been preserved not as a monument to the family above, but as a site of memory for the shadow workers who were systematically erased from the official record. This legacy manifests today in the psychological landscape of the descendants, both of the oppressors and the oppressed, creating a modern complicity of class that is finally being dismantled. There is an increased emphasis on uncovering ghosts in the machinery of national history, using advanced archaeological techniques to find the hidden diaries written in the dirt and wood of old estates. The story of the boy under the floorboards has become a metaphor for any truth that is suppressed for the sake of social stability. It serves as a warning that no matter how deep the pit or how thick the planks, the thumping heartbeat of the past will eventually demand to be heard. Public interest in these haunting discoveries under 250-year-old houses reflects a societal need to reconcile the refinement of the past with the cruelty that funded it. As researchers analyze the charcoal portraits scratched into the underside of the pine boards, they see not just the suffering of one child, but the resilience of a human spirit that refused to be fully extinguished by the dark. The house may still stand, but its foundation has been permanently altered by the light, ensuring that the price of power is now paid in the currency of truth rather than the currency of blood. The discovery under the floorboards acted as a spiritual breach, releasing more than just dust into the air of the Blackwood estate. It triggered a series of secondary revelations within the very walls of the mansion. As investigators moved from the floorboards to the structural lath and plaster, they found that the boy's shadow diary was not limited to the charcoal sketches beneath the pine. In the hollow spaces behind the wainscoting, they discovered a network of acoustic tubes, natural gaps in the timber through which the boy had whispered for years, turning the house into a giant, wooden lung that breathed his presence into every room. These hidden diaries of sound explained why subsequent residents reported hearing murmurs that seemed to come from the architecture itself, a phenomenon now understood as the boy's attempt to claim a voice in a world that had declared him legally dead. This architectural haunting serves as a visceral reminder of an era focused on transparency, where the hidden structures of the past are being dismantled to reveal the ghosts in the machinery. The physical house, once a symbol of domestic autonomy and Southern refinement, is now viewed as a complex recording device of human suffering, where every joist and beam holds the thumping heartbeat of its suppressed history. Archaeological teams have begun using laser mapping to record these ritual concealments in real time, proving that the boy's confinement was a masterclass in psychological engineering designed to keep the price of power hidden from the light of day. The final analysis of the Blackwood site reveals a chilling truth. The family did not just hide a boy. They built a monument to his absence. By weaving his existence into the literal fabric of their home, they ensured that their refinement was forever bonded to his absolute dark. The site stands as a testament that while power can build a floor, it can never truly silence the life that survives beneath it. The collective insurance policy of the 19th century elite has finally been canceled by the forensic truth, leaving the house not as a home, but as a hollowed-out witness to the resilience of the human spirit. Although the physical excavations at the Blackwood estate have concluded, the digital and cultural echoes of the boy under the floorboards continue to propagate through a new era of accountability. There is a renewed national focus on uncovering the truth of American foundations, often utilizing the very technology that brought the Blackwood secrets to light. The charcoal portraits and spiritual caches have now been digitized into a high-resolution virtual museum, allowing a global audience to walk through the acoustic tubes of the house without disturbing the fragile remains of the past. This transition from physical sight to digital record ensures that the ghost in the machinery is no longer trapped in a single location, but serves as a persistent and unignorable data point in the history of human rights. The psychological weight of the discovery has also manifested in a restitution of narrative for the descendants of the estate's shadow workers. Community leaders are using the Blackwood findings to advocate for the preservation of other at-risk historical sites where the collective insurance policy of silence might still be in effect. By transforming the mansion from a monument of refinement into a laboratory of truth, the narrative has shifted the price of power from those who were crushed to those who committed the crushing. The house stands today as a hollowed-out witness, its boards removed and its walls exposed, proving that the most stable structures are those built on transparency rather than the systematic burial of the inconvenient. Ultimately, the story of the boy under the floorboards serves as the definitive Southern Gothic parable for the 21st century. It reminds us that every piano lesson and imported wine enjoyed by the elite was a note in a symphony that required the absolute silence of another. The thumping heartbeat of the boy is no longer a sound of terror, but a rhythmic call for vigilance, a reminder that the past is never truly buried as long as the wood still groans and the earth still holds its breath. The Blackwood case is closed, but the lesson remains. The light of truth is the only force capable of turning a shallow grave into a sacred space. The discovery of the boy's confinement opened a new chapter in the psychological analysis of the Blackwood lineage, revealing a profound behavioral and cognitive difficulty that plagued the family for generations. Clinical historians have noted that the confinement process did not just affect the boy. It created a reciprocal incidence of worry, helplessness, and fear within the masters themselves. The family's descent into madness, characterized by an over-acuteness of the senses and an obsession with the thumping heartbeat under the floorboards, is now viewed as a direct result of the cortisol-driven stress and psychological distress associated with maintaining such a monstrous secret. This irredeemable moral breach turned the mansion into a living tomb, where the mental health of the inhabitants mirrored the decaying physical state of the structure. The boy's survival in the absolute dark, a feat that defies traditional understanding of child development, has become a central case study for researchers investigating the long-term impact of isolation. By mapping the ritual concealments and the charcoal sketches, experts have identified a dynamic aspect of loneliness development that the boy used as a survival mechanism. His shadow diary was not just a recording of facts, but a spectral return of his own consciousness, an attempt to bridge the liminal state between life and death that his captors had forced him into. This internal torment was shared by the family above, who, in their desperate attempt to confront their own guilt, became as much prisoners of the floorboards as the boy they held beneath them. The Blackwood case highlights how socially isolated children can face lifelong challenges in communication and social interaction if they are ever brought into the light. For the boy, the light came too late, and his developmental learning abilities were forever stunted by the lack of social relationships in his formative years. The house remains a monument to his absence, but the acoustic tubes and hidden staircases found in the walls prove that the price of power was a complete erosion of the human soul for both the victim and the victimizer. In the end, the Blackwood legacy is a warning that some emotional wounds may never heal, and the dead, whether literal or social, will continue to haunt the living until the last board is pried away. The investigation has moved beyond the floorboards to the very skeleton of the Blackwood mansion, revealing a culture of concealment that was engineered into the building's blueprints. While the boy was the primary occupant of the pit, workers have recently discovered secret rooms and hidden staircases behind the library's false shelves, spaces designed not for refuge, but for the systematic monitoring of the enslaved population. These architectural anomalies provided the family with a panopticon-like view of their estate, allowing them to maintain an illusion of divine omniscience while hiding the boy in a liminal state between the visible world and the underworld. The price of power was thus literalized in the floor plan, where every refinement of the upper levels was supported by a subterranean network of ritual concealments and structural lies. This Gothic afterlife of the building has become a focal point for modern forensic teams, who use sensors to detect the spectral return of past events through chemical residues in the wood and plaster. The discovery of biological traces within the acoustic tubes confirms that the boy's presence was a constant, physical reality that leaked into the family's daily life, contributing to their psychological distress and the eventually shattered state of their mental health. In the current socio-political landscape, where uncovering the truth of historical foundations is a priority, the Blackwood Mansion serves as a physical evidence locker for the crimes against humanity that were woven into the domestic sphere. The final dismantling of the secret spaces has revealed that the thumping heartbeat was more than a sensory delusion. It was the rhythmic sound of the house itself breathing through the boy's confined space. By exposing these hidden diaries of the architecture, researchers have successfully canceled the collective insurance policy of silence that protected the Blackwood lineage for over a century. As the excavations wind down, the site stands as a hollowed-out witness that the most enduring secrets are those built into the very walls we inhabit. The boy's story is no longer a whisper in the wood, but a roar in the light of day, ensuring that the architecture of secrecy can never be rebuilt. As the investigation draws to a close, the story of the Blackwood boy has transitioned from a physical excavation to a metaphysical phenomenon known as the Gothic afterlife. The removal of the last floorboard did not silence the house. Instead, it amplified a spectral return that forensic psychologists and historians now categorize as a liminal echo of prolonged isolation. The price of power paid by the Blackwood family has finally come due in the form of a total collapse of their historical narrative, as modern digital mapping reveals that the architecture of secrecy was actually a map of their own moral decay. The thumping heartbeat, originally attributed to a telltale heart phenomenon, is now understood as a structural vibration caused by the boy's rhythmic tapping, a desperate, decade-long Morse code that the wood itself remembered and continued to emit even after the cavity was emptied. This final chapter of the investigation has uncovered the ultimate concealment, a small, iron-bound ledger found within the hidden staircases that detailed the exact cost of the boy's erasure, from the ritual concealments used to bind him to the bribes paid to local officials to maintain the collective insurance policy of silence. In the landscape of transparency, this ledger has become the primary evidence used to dismantle the complicity of class that allowed such a crime to persist. The boy, once a ghost in the machinery, is now the lead witness in a virtual courtroom, his shadow diary of charcoal sketches serving as a visual testimony that has outlived his captors by a century and a half. The Blackwood estate, now a hollowed-out witness to the resilience of the human spirit, serves as a reminder that ritual concealments are never permanent. As the research teams withdraw, they leave behind a site where the absolute dark has been replaced by an unblinking light, ensuring that no future architecture of secrecy can be built upon the systematic crushing of a human soul. The boy's voice, once a whisper in an acoustic tube, is now a roar that echoes through the annals of history, proving that the truth is the only force capable of turning a living tomb into a monument of justice. The final forensic report has transitioned from the architecture of secrecy to the biological reality of the boy himself, revealing how total isolation early programmed his physiological systems. Clinical analysis of the remains indicates that his years in the absolute dark led to a less pronounced daytime cortisol level, a hallmark of severe early life social deprivation that permanently alters the brain's stress response. This dysregulation of dopamine likely resulted in a liminal state where the boy experienced intense social cravings, motivating him to create the rhythmic tapping that later became the thumping heartbeat of the house. While the family Blackwood above sought to keep him in the absolute dark, his body was fighting its own war of attrition, resulting in impaired brain development and behavioral difficulties that mirror modern cases of extreme confinement. The discovery of the boy's shadow diary also explains the specific aesthetic choices of the late Blackwood era, such as the use of haint blue paint on the porch ceilings. This architectural feature, ubiquitous in the South to keep ghosts away, was a literalized fear response from a family who felt the spectral return of their secret every time the wind caught the floorboards. In 1865, the house was a living tomb where the inhabitants were stuck in a state of active stress, eventually leading to the cognitive deterioration and mental health crises that decimated the lineage. In the current landscape of truth discovery, these superstitions are now seen as clinical symptoms of a community suffering from a complicity of class and the heavy price of power. As research concludes, the boy's story is no longer a Southern Gothic legend, but a primary document in the study of human resilience. The ritual concealments found in the walls, items like animal bones and old toys, are now understood as protective measures taken by the family to silence a thumping heartbeat that refused to be buried. The Blackwood estate stands as a hollowed-out witness to the fact that isolation is never a one-way street. It erodes the humanity of the captor just as surely as it scars the biology of the captive. The light of justice has finally reached the pit, transforming a hidden space into a permanent reminder that the past is never dead. It is simply waiting for someone to pry up the boards.